Hey guys, today we're going to be building a media center slash light occasional bit of living room gaming system based around the AMD 8000 series processors. AMD and also Scan Computers UK very kindly sent these out for me to look at. They are a UK retailer that sell a whole host of different components. They have their 3XS pre-built systems, some pro audio video gear. If you need anything to do with technology, they're the place to go to, and I'll link them down in the description box below. So we're going to be basing the system around the 8600G, which doesn't require any discrete graphics as it's got it built in. That helps us keep the price and also the power consumption really low down. A few of the parts here are also a bit of a price premium, but I have got some cheaper alternatives that I'll tell you about as we go throughout the video. Then if you're a first time builder, this system's going to be really easy to follow along for. The majority of parts just need to be plugged into a motherboard, and then we'll put that into the case and wire it together. So it should be very easy to follow along to as well. So looking forward to this one, and let's get building. So first things first, we're going to get the parts onto the motherboard and then get that into the case. But as I said in the intro, it's the majority of parts anyway, so it's going to be fairly simple to do. So first off, the motherboard here I have is the Asus Strix B650-I. If you want to save yourself a little bit of money, you can get the MSI B650, which is about £40 or $40 cheaper. So first things first, I'm going to open up our socket, which will then allow us to install our AMD 8600G. This is a 6-core 12-thread processor with a base core of 4.3 GHz and a maximum turbo of 5 GHz. And I have a full video covering all of the 8000 series on the channel already. Full benchmarks and testing and all sorts of things like that, thermals as well. So I'm going to just lower this down into the socket, give it a bit of a wiggle so it's in the middle. Lower that down. I've left the socket cover on because that will pop off, as you'll see when I close the lever like that. There we go, so that's off. Remember to keep that as well if you need to RMA your motherboard. So that's the 8600G all installed. If you want to look at any others, I do recommend you watch the full video I published last week. That will give you the pros and cons of each processor. But the 8600G is a nice sweet spot in price to performance and the features that it offers as well. So for our memory, I've got 16 GB of Corsair Vengeance DDR5. This is running at 5200 megatransfers per second and cache latency 40. So as we've got two slots for this board, we will use both of these. So we'll line up the notch, make sure we've got it the right way around. Slide that in. Deep breath in and all the way out. The crunch always reminds me of the chiropractor videos, and the same for this one. There you go, so that's now installed. For storage, I've got a Corsair MP700. Now you will have a limitation with the AMD 8000 series of Gen 4 speed storage, so don't buy Gen 5 drive, it just won't support the speeds. So I'd recommend that you look at the alternative one I got for this, which is the Solidigm P41 Plus, again in 2 TB. 2 TB is a nice size for a living room system. You can put a nice lot of games, and then also your films and things, especially if they're going to be Blu-ray with high bit rates, they can be quite chunky files, so 2 TB is a nice size. So I'm going to take off the heatsink of this motherboard, and again, if you use the alternative board, you're still going to be looking at taking off the cover for the top slot. Now we've got 2 thermal pads for this one, so we make sure to peel those off each side. We've got our gum sticks now ready to take the drive, so we're going to put this in at 45 degrees, wiggle it into the slot, and then push it down, and then just turn a little latch to hold that into place. I believe MSI got a very similar thing as well, so it'll be a nice, easy, quick release latch. And then we'll bring our heatsink and then pop that back down onto the top and then screw it into place. So we've got our CPU, our memory, and then also our storage all installed. The next step is to remove these clips that are pre-installed to the motherboard. That's the case for the MSI board or this one, as the AMD coolers and also the Be Quiet we're going to be using have a different mounting mechanism. There's 2 screws for each of these, really easy to take off, and then that clip comes off as well. So for the cooling, I'm using the Pure Rock LP. This is a low profile Be Quiet cooler. It's got a 92mm fan. So pretty diddy, but it will fit in the space constraints that we do have with this motherboard. Now the cheaper option for this is to use a cooler that comes included with the actual CPU. Perfectly adequate for what we need it for, but this one is just a little bit more of an upgrade to keep things a little bit cooler. So we're going to need a couple of parts for this one. We're going to need to go into the Intel box to get the very small screws out of it. 2, 3 and 4. The rest can then go back in the box because we don't need any of these. So just following the manual, we've got the upside of these brackets and then 4 little screws that go into the underside of the cooler. Screw those down. Then what we're going to do is put this over the CPU and install it from the back, which is a little bit weird, but as it's such a low profile, it's very difficult to get it from the front. So a bit of a different method, but still basically works out the same anyway. I'm going to take these little screws that have got a thread on the end and then thread those all the way through the back plate. Seems a little bit backwards, but for this is how this is installed. as there isn't quite enough space to actually install it from the front. So now we can bring that CPU cooler down onto the processor. And we've got pre-applied thermal paste as well, so that makes things nice and easy. And then going to turn it over and then alternating, like I said, if you're going to install a tyre, so we get a nice even mounting pressure. 4-pin header, and then just plug that into the top. For this motherboard, it's going to be the grey one, but you might need to refer to your motherboard manual if you're going to use a different board, as that may be a different connection. And then we'll just tuck the rest of that cable down along by the DIMM slots. Now that is ready to go into our case, and then we just wire things up and we're done. It's quite weird actually not having to do so many steps, but for a nice easy budget system, I'm all for it. The case for this build is the CIT, the model is the MTX 008B 300 watt. A bit of a mouthful, but it's a cheap case with a built-in power supply. This is a bronze power supply, but will be fine for what we need it for. And it's also a TFX, so like you see in a server rack, for example. So there's a couple of things we need to do to get this ready for our case. First of all is take out this hard drive mount. I have taken out the screw that's in there, and then it just lifts up on the inside and slides out. Now, of course, if you'd like to, you could always put a big hard drive in there if you really need some mass storage. It does include that, and it's got some little rubber grommets as well for anti-vibration. So there's another option if you don't want to go for NVMe or an SSD. So now in the actual system, we've got our connectors for our front panel and also our USB connectors. On the front, we have got a couple of USB 3s, which is good to see, especially on this kind of price case. And then we've also got a headphone and microphone jack. So just going into the bag to get out the screws we need for our motherboard. So these 4 silver ones. And then I've got a couple of connectors that I'm going to do just before I put this in. Well, this has only got one 4-pin, whereas the motherboard's got an 8-pin, so hopefully it should be okay. Generally speaking, some of these motherboards do run okay without both, and we're not exactly going to be running anything drastically powerful with this system anyway, so we should be okay. And we also need our motherboard power, so big 24-pin ketchup and mustard cables, but they'll be fine for this. There's also another 92mm fan in this case, which I'm going to put onto the additional header on the motherboard, just a 3-pin, but we'll go onto a 4-pin header without any problem. So we've got some other connectors. So we've got a front panel audio. This will plug in just over here on the where the SSD goes. It plugs in like so. And then we've got our USB 3s. So this is the big blue one. And then quite a long connector. This is also keyed as well, so it can only go in one way. There we go. And then we've also got our front panel. So just refer to your motherboard manual if you're not so sure about these. I'm just going to connect the power and the reset. And then power will go to the top 3 and 4. And then reset will go onto the bottom 3 and 4. So now we'll just carefully lower this in. Careful not to trap any cables. Line it up with the back. And then just screw it in. And then that's now installed and ready to go. So we've got the hard drive cage. You can obviously put that back in if you'd like to. I'm going to leave it out for this scenario. We have got the 92mm fan, so hopefully that will push some air as well over the components. And then there's a couple of thumb screws that I removed to actually access it in the first place. So there is our system all complete. I think it took me about an hour. That's to film everything as well. So you could put one of these together in probably about 30 minutes, even less. So now we need to do a couple of bits like installing Windows, and then also setting our XMP or DOCP, so it's going to run our memory at the rated speeds. And then we can do some tests. I also wanted to try some thermals as well, and then I'll give you my overall conclusion and some ideas of what we could do with this in the future as well. I've just had to update the BIOS for my motherboard. I did actually try and boot this on camera already, but it did need a newer revision to support that 8000 series processors. Hopefully by the time you go to build a system yourself, you won't have to do this, but it is very easy if you need to. We've just got the file from the ASUS site. You put it in the correct port and then hold down the BIOS flash button. It does it all itself. You don't have to take anything out or use an older CPU or anything like that. Just literally updates itself and it stopped flashing, so we're ready to boot again. So going now into the BIOS. So that screen before just said that we've basically got a new CPU installed. We need to press F1 to go into the setup. So on the left of the screen we've got DOCP. We're going to just swap this over to enabled. That will then run at 5200 mega transfers, so we're not going to be leaving any performance on the table. We can also see our other stats as well. So we've got the 8600G with the Radeon 760M graphics. And we've also got our MP700, so our storage. So everything is present and correct. You can see our fan spinning as well. And we've got 49 degrees currently on the CPU. So we're going to press F10 and then enter to save. Then I'm going to get my Windows, get that installed, and then we can do some benchmarks and then thermal tests. So it's now clipboard time. Got a nice conclusion to talk to you about, some results and things like that. I have got my camera in a different position this time because it's usually at a different angle, but there's not very much of it to see, so it's very samey in this kind of scenario. So we've got some free benchmarks that you can download first of all to test against your current system if you'd like to. We've got Geekbench 5, there's also Cinebench, a Blender render test, and then also 3D Mark, which you can get a free download from Steam on. Then we've got some 1080p low benchmarks. Now, being that this is an AMD CPU, if you've got any games that can take advantage of FSR, then this is going to give you a really nice benefit. So Starfield is one of those games that is really difficult to run. If you do add FSR, even on low, you do get around 38 frames. Seems pretty low, but it does run pretty smooth. And then going up the rack, we've got the games that are like the esports titles. We've got Apex Legends, a nice average of 71 FPS. Cyberpunk, a very difficult title to run generally, but again, FSP can really help you out here, reaching similar results to Apex. And then Valorant, another popular esports title, got up to 150 frames on high. So that's thanks to the art style, though. It's very simple to run, which is obviously good for a case like this. If you want to see any more info on the games that I tested, I do recommend you check out the full 8000 series video that I made last week. That dives into more information such as minimum frames, 1% lows, and also compared to the other 8000 series processors. In terms of the temperatures from this system, we did see temperatures over 90 degrees with a delta of 73.9. That was using synthetic tests though, so real world usage. It's unlikely that you're going to see temperatures that high. Anyway, I think this is a really nice little system, easy to build as well, and hopefully anyone that's trying to do this as a beginner has been able to follow along very easily. One thing I would recommend you change if you want to upgrade this a little bit is put a Noctua fan in the front just to get some quality air over those components, as the one in the front is okay, but it is a cheaper, more generic one. Price wise, the system as I've got it configured here is about £800, $800, but you've got things in there that you don't really need, like the Gen 5 drive. And then if you use the alternatives that I mentioned, you can get this down to around $550, which I think is a cracking price for this little system. Now, some people are going to say, well, what about doing this CPU with this GPU combination? And that is something that I'm actually considering exploring. If you'd like to see something like that, we'll take some value options and kind of pair them up and then do some comparisons against this system, just to see what kind of value that it offers. We could also do some different variants to this system as well. So we'll have a very small system, and then maybe we could do some different budgets and kind of step up the performance of it. So we'll go maybe increments of $200 on what we could do and what we could change to get a little bit of a higher performance system. If that's something you'd be interested in, we can always do that as well. So let me know. But I think for now, that's going to be it for this one. I'll link all the parts in the description box if you want to pick any up, also with the cheaper alternatives there as well. Of course, a big thank you to AMD and Scout and all the parts that you've seen for this video, and also the AMD CPU roundup that I did last week. Please go and check that out if you haven't already. If you enjoyed this video, then please subscribe and ding the bell so you don't miss any future ones. We could always look at doing some other budget options as well, so if you've got anything you'd like to suggest, please leave it in the comments box below and I'll see what I can do. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.